A very pleasant good afternoon to all of our viewers. We are so delighted that you have joined us on Let's Talk for this afternoon. Of course, Let's Talk is a program sponsored by the Southwood Conference where we discuss issues that impact our lives from day to day, especially in the Christian context, but issues which are not generally very much discussed in the open. We believe that it is important to provide opportunity for individuals to hear, to understand, and to be able to express and get their questions answered. And so on Let's Talk, we do just that. This afternoon, we are talking to the matter of religious liberty. Is it really an issue in today's world? Many of us, especially in the Western world, operate on the constitutional provisions of religious liberty. But do we really have things that impact our religious freedom? With us this afternoon is a panel of what I would say experts. But before I introduce them, we want to take time to talk to God. Shall we pray? Eternal Father and our God, we pray that you will be with us as we go into this very important discussion. We ask for your wisdom, your guidance. We pray that you will guide in the discussion and grant that the information presented will prove meaningful to all of our viewers as we look at this very significant area of life, religious liberty. Grant us your peace and your presence in Jesus' name, amen. Well, viewers, again, good afternoon. And as indicated, we have a distinguished panel of attorneys with us and a veteran in the area of religious liberty. In fact, I will begin by introducing Pastor Dr. Clive Dottin. Many of the persons around the Caribbean would know Pastor Dottin, and he is not a stranger to Let's Talk. Pastor Dottin has been on Let's Talk before. In fact, Pastor Dottin, folks are begging for you to come back. Well, you're here in a different capacity this afternoon. Pastor Dottin is the Religious Liberty Director at the Caribbean Union. He's also Director of Missions, and we are delighted to have him with us. Pastor Dottin, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure. It's a real pleasure to be here, and God bless you, and God bless everyone. Yes.
Wonderful. Next, we have Attorney Kelvin John. Again, it's a delight to have Attorney John with us this afternoon. Attorney John possesses a Master of Law. Well, of course, he graduated from the University of the West Indies, Cave campus in Barbados, with a Bachelor of Law degrees from 1991 to 1993. He attended the Norman Manley Law School in Kingston, Jamaica, where he completed a legal education certificate. He possesses a Master of Law in International Maritime Law at the International Maritime Law Institute. He is also a graduate of the University of West Indies with an Executive Master's in Business Administration, having completed that in 2002. He is the past president of the Bar Association of Antigua Barbuda and is a member of the Bar Association of the Commonwealth of Dominica, Notary Public, and of course, he is also a certified court mediator. We are so delighted to have you with us this afternoon, Attorney John. Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Greene, and good afternoon to all your viewers and listeners around the world.
Well, I will go. Thank you so much. Pleasure having you. I will go to someone who is much younger than Attorney John, but works in his law firm. We have with us Attorney Lloyd Weste. I want to say regarding many of, in fact, all of our attorneys this afternoon, not only are they attorneys, but they are very involved in their local congregation. Lloyd Weste was called to the bar in Antigua in 2007. He's presently engaged in civil work, industrial law, religious and litigious and non-litigious, criminal law, constitutional administrative litigation, wills and probates, and that kind of thing. He also has a master's degree in IT law, and I probably should let you know that Lloyd is an avid cricketer. And excels at the sport at both the local and the regional level. We are delighted to have you with us Attorney Weste. Good afternoon and welcome to Let's Talk.
Good afternoon, Dr. Greene, and to the panel and to everyone listening. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you.
All right, now we do have some wonderful ladies with us. I chose to introduce the ladies last so that the good look will linger in the minds of our listeners. And next I go to Attorney Korah Galloway. That's right, Attorney Korah Galloway. We're stepping across to the Emerald Isle of Montserrat. Sister Korah Galloway is a born Monstrattian. She said that with a degree of pride, but she grew up in England. Her love for the master pushed her to excel in everything that she has put her hand to. She's very involved in church ministry. She serves in her church there at the New Ebenezer Church, and is also the religious liberty leader in that congregation. She was admitted to the Law Society of England and Wales as a solicitor advocate with higher rights of audience in civil proceedings on the 17th of December, 2012. She graduated from the Eugene Dupont Law School in the Bahamas and was subsequently called to the Montserrat Bar Association in November of 2017. Therefore, Sister Galloway commenced her prosecuting career as a Crown Counsel in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions on the island of Montserrat. She has a passion for safeguarding victims of domestic violence and sexual abuse and those who are vulnerable. Attorney Galloway, it's a pleasure to have you. Good afternoon and welcome to Let's Talk.
Good afternoon, Dr. Greene. Good afternoon, members of the panel. Good afternoon, viewers. It certainly is a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Next, we have joining us from the Twin Island Republic of St. Kitts and Nevis, we have Attorney O'Loughlin. We are so delighted that you have chosen to be with us this afternoon. Attorney Merlese O'Loughlin is a native of Anguilla and resides in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. She qualified as an attorney at law in 2002 and has been admitted to the bar of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court in St. Christopher and Nevis and Anguilla. For the past 16 years, she has served as an in-house legal counsel at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, dealing principally with banking and financial law matters. Sister O'Loughlin currently holds the position of Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Leader at the Molyneux congregation there in District 2 in St. Kitts. Attorney O'Loughlin, good afternoon and welcome to Let's Talk.
Good afternoon, Dr. Greene. Thank you for that introduction, and good afternoon to the rest of the panelists, and good afternoon to viewers. I'm very pleased to be a part of this panel discussion this afternoon, and I do look forward to the discussions.
Delighted to have you on Let's Talk, and delighted to have all of our participants for this afternoon. Now, we are talking about religious liberty. It is a discussion that is very relevant, very meaningful. I want to begin by asking Dr. Dottin just to respond to this question. Why religious liberty? What's the big fuss about religious liberty? How important is it? Should we really be concerned? Lots of people go about their lives every day. They're not so concerned about religious freedom, religious liberty. We take it for granted. So Dr. Dottin, you are the Director for Religious Liberty at the Caribbean Union. I know you're very involved. Why this matter of religious liberty, and what's so important about it?
Well, number one, we were made by God. And Dr. John Grass answers the question in a very simple way, yet profound. And he has said that, religious liberty is a gift from God to all mankind. So that is the essential answer. So it's a gift from all mankind. In 1999, the GC highlighted a major issue there about the protection of the rights of minorities. So apart from the fact that God has given us, he has made us that way, he has granted to us. Nobody could really give us that, but only God. You know, you could fulfill the mandate of God and provide in your workplace, you know, in your educational institution, religious freedom, but it's a gift from God. God made us free because character could only be developed, all right, when you have the freedom of choice. But then and I'll close it here, from a last day eschatological perspective, we know from what the prophecy says, and we are Church of Prophecy, that what is going to happen in the end is that, and what we see happening increasingly, especially when it comes to Christians, is that rights, fundamental rights, will be taken away. And we say that the most fundamental right, upon which all other rights are built, the platform for all human rights, happens to be the right freedom of worship. So we state that in no uncertain terms, so that it's a gift from God. And secondly, we have to pursue. Ellen White puts it well. She says the banner of truth and religious liberty has been entrusted to the remnant church, and we must not run from that. So it's as a gift from God, number one. But secondly, since you have, you know, incursions, and as we live closer to the end, we're going to see great incursions. And of course, the Bible says all of the godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. So I should tell you quickly, we started in 1893, Earlier. Of course, we have Earlier, and we have Carla, and in Trinidad, we have Tralala, and by you must have, you know, Mala, Slala, I don't know, Gala in Guyana. But in 1893, Earlier came into being. It was only in 1946 that Earlier opened it up to everybody. Once you're in the business of promoting religious freedom and justice issues, it was open to you. And in 2003, the United Nations recognized us in a big way. So we became chartered under the United Nations. So long before 1948. And, you know, we appreciate that document, freedom to choose a religion, freedom to change a religion, which is a huge issue now, with things like Sharia law and what have you, and freedom to have no religion at all. So we respect that. And we have to tell even our church members, even dealing with their children sometimes and the young people, we also have to respect that.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Dottin. Now, I want to pick it up right there, because in the Caribbean context, we have what is referred to as constitutional provisions for religious liberty. Now, with us this afternoon, we have representatives from Montserrat, from St. Kitts Nevis, from Antigua. So I'm going to ask, first, I want to begin with Attorney Kelvin John. What does the Constitution of Antigua Barbuda say with respect to this whole matter of religious freedom, the right that Pastor Dottin made reference to just now?
Well, the constitutional document that we rely on in Antigua and in the Commonwealth Caribbean and throughout the Commonwealth is the supreme law of the land. No other law is higher than it. That document creates the fundamental organs of the state parliament to make laws, the executive, cabinet, and the civil service, etc., to run the state, and the judicial branch of the state. But all those bodies and organs and statutory bodies and organs of states and the executive arms of the state are bound by the preamble and by the fundamental rights provisions of the Constitution. The constitutional document that establishes us has a preamble, and it is a preamble that many people overlook. And it starts by saying, even before you get the fundamental rights clause that protects inalienable rights for individuals, naturally born persons, and even for artificial persons like corporations incorporated, you have a preamble that says, whereas the people of Antigua and Barbuda proclaim that they are a sovereign nation founded upon principles that acknowledge the supremacy of God. So any discussion we need to have about religious liberty, we have to go to the preamble and the dignity and worth of the human person, the entitlement of all persons to the fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual, the position of the family in society. So family life is grounded in the preamble and is the foundation and base on which all the organs of state are built in a society of free men and women and free institutions. Now, that's the preamble. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but pastors can preach a wonderful sermon on it, because it is Paul took up the opportunity to say, ye men of and back it, I think it was Mars Hill, you have something up there that says to the unknown God as a fundamental pillar of your state. And I am using the opportunity to preach and tell you that this is the everlasting supreme God, Yahweh God. We have a preamble, and it is something that in any discussions or pastors or church or have to engage in Antigua, and I show the other islands of the state, you must refer them back to the preamble. Not just go straight to section 11. Section 11, no, it speaks to the freedom of conscience, and that is the section that we rely upon. No person except with his own consent shall be hindered in the enjoyment of his freedom of conscience. And for the purposes of that section, freedom of conscience includes freedom of thought and of religion, freedom to change your religion or your belief, and freedom either along or in community with others, both in public and in private, to manifest and also to propagate his religion or belief in worship, teaching, practice, and observance. Some other islands like Dominica, when they were scared of republicanism and maybe communism in 78, into that section they say, and also the right to have religious schools as an express provision, but it is implied here. So that is the fundamental rights clause, and no statute can be passed that takes away from those fundamental rights, and no statutory body or functionary should exercise his discretion in administrative matters of state and exclude those rights and fundamental rights. And our labor code picks up on this, and it talks about in the employment law, in private sector work, there should be no discrimination based on your creed, religion, and your freedom and faith in God.
Very interesting. We are going to come back to something you mentioned there in the preamble, but I want to go to St. Kitts Nevis, then to Montserrat. Sister O'Loughlin, is there any difference in the Constitution in St. Kitts? Can you say a word on the constitutional provisions for St. Kitts Nevis?
So the constitutional provisions in St. Kitts and Nevis are quite similar to what Mr. John would have just articulated. As a matter of fact, the constitutions throughout our English-speaking Caribbean countries are very similar in content. So in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have Section 11 that speaks to the protection of the freedom of conscience and freedom of thought and of religion, as referred to by Mr. John. The provision also goes on to speak to the whole issue of religious communities being able to establish and maintain places of education, and to manage those places of education. And they should not essentially be prevented from providing religious instruction for persons of that particular religious community in the course of education. So there are those provisions that speak directly to the issue of the protection of your religious freedom. We also have the section that speaks to, which is section 14, that speaks to, or rather section 15, that speaks to the whole issue of discrimination, protection from discrimination on various grounds. And one of those grounds is creed. Well, that is a term that's used in the Constitution, creed, which essentially refers to your religious beliefs. So we're looking at section 11 in the case of St. Kitts and Nevis. We're also looking at section 15, which speaks to protection from discrimination on the basis of creed or on the basis of religion. It should be noted, however, that in the case of those rights or freedoms they are not absolute. So the rights are qualified, and I suppose later on in the discussions, we can speak a little bit more about limitations that can be placed on those rights. But just in summary, our rights are always subject to the rights of others and subject to the public interest. So we can delve a little bit more into those discussions later.
Thank you so much. I want to go across to Montserrat. Now, Montserrat is, unlike Antigua, Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, that we consider ourselves independent. Of course, we are still members of the Commonwealth, but Montserrat is a dependent territory. So, Sister Galloway, just share your thoughts quickly on that for us.
Okay, we do have a constitution, the Montserrat Constitution Order of 2010. And likewise, in our preamble, the supremacy of God is referred to. So that certainly is something that is constant throughout. And in section 2, where we have, in part 1, section 2 references indeed made to freedom of conscience and of religion. And like the other in Antigua, where we also have, and over there in Nevis, we also have a section 11, which speaks to the protection of freedom of conscience and of religion. And the discrimination is dealt with under section 16, where that no law or any provision should be made which is discriminatory. And that when it refers to discriminatory, that also includes religion. And so it seems that although we may have dependent states and independent states, there fundamentally, when it comes to religion, there is similarity in our constitution that we have that freedom of religion.
Okay, wonderful. So all across the Caribbean, we seem to have very similar structures. Now, Elder West, there is when the preamble was made reference to just now, and Sister Galloway made reference to this too, talking about the supremacy of God. I am curious to see that in the Constitution, because of course we in the Western world believe in the supremacy of God. What obtains to individuals who do not believe in God, or who are atheists, or maybe members of another religion such as Hinduism, and who do not necessarily worship the God as we know today, the Constitution saying that we believe in the supremacy of God? How do we, I do know that there is a section that says that there must not be discrimination, but I don't know if you want to just say a word on that that I found interesting.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Dr. Greene. It is a very good question. And the reality is that the Constitution, each Constitution, protects the fundamental rights and freedoms of every individual as against the state. So even though individuals may be atheistic or may share a different religious belief than we do, they still have the right to protection of their freedom of conscience. And the reference in each constitution would have referenced the freedom of conscience and reference the right to exercise your creed. And that's really your system of religious beliefs. And so the Constitution would not have specifically mentioned the Adventist religion or the Catholic religion. So there is no limitation on a person's belief, a person's decision to follow a particular religious system or to change their religious system. And although a different religious system may not have God as the supreme being in that particular religion, the Constitution still affords the same protections to these individuals who share different religious beliefs as it does for us as Seventh-day Adventists who believe in God.
Thank you so much. Pastor Dottin, you want to jump in there with something?
I want to jump in here. Well, Trinidad, Section 4 of the Constitution is really almost a reflection, a total reflection of the UNDHR 1948. And freedom of conscience and religious belief and observance enshrined, in addition to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Now, if you watch that International Covenant, you will see where day of worship is specified. And I want just to rush two things in the interest of time. When Mr. Pandey came into office, that time I had heard about the Shops Bill in Barbados. Now, the Shops Bill in Barbados is a step ahead in a form, in that in Barbados, if a person is denied employment because of the day of worship, all right, we have to remember that, and the lawyers could correct me, International Covenant signing on until it's translated into law. It's just a matter of goodwill generally. So I went to Mr. Maraj, and we had several back and forth on the Shops Bill, and they felt it was a good thing, it was a progressive legislation. When it came to some of the other Christian Sunday worshiping brethren, they didn't find it was a very good idea at all. And with my opaque eyes, they thought it was favoring, I was pushing it because to favor one group, as Seventh-day Adventist, forgetting Islam on Friday, which a popular university case in St. Augustine highlighted in a big way, because he refused to go to class on Friday. Have exams and that kind of thing. So that is one thing I want to share, so that sometimes you think in a Christian society, well, we are plural, but you have to watch out for who you think would support you more than anybody else. Sometimes believes that you want to have a law that facilitates you, and not them. So I just wanted to mention that. And Ramesh Maharaj, who is a well-known legal expert, told me, the pastor, we appreciate what the Shops Bill sets out to do. It's not just Saturday you're aiming for, but any day of worship. All right, it will facilitate. And he says, no, the Christians saw it one way. And how politics goes, you're looking at the numbers, you're crunching the numbers all the time. And so it didn't, up to now, it hasn't come true. But we have signed on to the covenant. But in terms of specifying, having a day of worship clause, not really, not into law.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Pastor Dottin. I want to jump right into this matter of Saturday observance. Particularly in the interest of time, I have my eyes fixed on the clock here. It's amazing how 1 hour could go by so quickly.
Yes.
Because as Seventh-day Adventists, we have that background. We're Seventh-day Adventists. We know that generally speaking, the territory surrounding us are when we compare ourselves, we may almost want to say that we are in the minority. But the challenge of operating in as much as we have constitutional provisions for religious liberty, with individuals going to classes on Saturdays, trying to get authorization not to work on Saturdays, that every now and then becomes an issue. I have had several instances where individuals have indicated that they have exams scheduled on Saturdays, and people are challenged. In fact, last year, was it, or the year before, there was a student in the University of the West Indies in Jamaica who was threatened to get a failing grade for his class because he refused to attend a particular assignment on a Saturday. Now, this is the Caribbean we're talking about with quote unquote religious freedom. So I want us to speak to that issue. Any one of you can jump in there. This matter of the challenge of the Saturday classes, exams, and the student who's a Seventh-day Adventist and wants to go. What provisions? Okay, we all said that our constitutions provide that right. But here are students who are still having challenges. We have external schools operating in the Caribbean. Here in Antigua, we have the university, the American University of Antigua. In St. Kitts, I believe they have Ross University and so on. So how do our students seek to get redress when there are these infringencies on their religious rights? Which one of your attorneys want to tackle this one?
Well, I just want to maybe go first, and those will surface from time to time. They have, and it's important that we have the Religious Liberty Department of the Church. I know, Dr. Greene, when you were secretary and all through, you've been at the forefront of those, even for employees. Just on if you go to the General Conference website, you will see that in November last year, a significant victory was won for a civil servant in Brazil and a student. And both cases were consolidated by the Supreme Court. And the majority, I think it was 8-3 in one regard and 7-4 in the other regard. And they came up with a principle that in Brazil, and they followed international conventions. They cited it in the judgment. I read it earlier on in the week. And they said that alternative arrangements must be made and reasonable accommodation. These were the two expressions used to accommodate persons of faith, and that applied to an institution, an educational institution in Brazil. And Brazil is a very, very large territory. It was a major victory for the church, and reasonable accommodation. That was a civil servant in probationary period who had to do an exam. It was placed on a Saturday, and he challenged it, and it went to the highest court in Brazil and won. So I just wanted to put that in. So you will have challenges from time to time where administrators will seek to assert their rights. So it's not something you can ever get rid of, but you constantly have to have a body of a religious liberty group vibrant in each island, in each territory, in each conference to respond to those challenges. And to have, first of all, a type of dialogue, mediation. You seek to persuade and seek to dialogue peaceably with the administrators and enlighten them. Sometimes it is born out of ignorance and a sense of, elitism. We are in charge, we are the institution, you're just a mere student. My thoughts.
Okay, let me add quickly again, because this may just sort of add to the discussion, so to speak. Not only do we have challenges with students in academic institutions, but then there is also something that we hear branded about this matter of essential service. Very often individuals are told, well, this department is an essential service, and so you have to work. They say nurses, doctors, in some cases, policemen. But the matter of an individual requiring to work when he or she has the constitutional provisions for their worship. We do understand that there are times when it is necessary. If the doctor doesn't go to the hospital on Saturday, the patient may die. If your church gets robbed, you call the police station and they say, no police is working today, it's a day of worship. That can be a challenge. But how far do we carry this? And because we do have the challenge where some persons are being told, well, this is an essential service. And we find that there is one definition of essential service in one territory, another definition in another territory.
Well, very interesting, I should say. Let me just put in reverse for a minute. The supremacy of God in the preamble of the Constitution is coming under increasing scrutiny. I wouldn't say so far that it has been challenged in a very robust way. But that's a few years ago, Oswald Peer, he's not so well these days, I should tell you, but he has that experience as a layman of 50 years in religious liberty. And he went to the consultation. And the first place that created a big explosion was the supremacy of God clause. And we should expect that as the society gets increasingly more secular. We as Seventh-day Adventists have to realize that we have to keep respecting the rights of others. But I share Kelvin's view that we have seen in our universities, not just UWI, but even in the Virgin Islands University, when you're pulled together, like the graduations on Sabbath, for example, when you're pulled together, you have greater force. It was a Muslim who defended us recently, all right, in UWI. He had made a claim for, no, he's not going to classes on a Friday. He had made a claim for that. And when we said we're not going to classes on Saturday, he joined us in the foray. So that I'm saying in terms of coming together, I feel the challenge for us right now in terms of that essential services, we have to carefully examine the law and carefully examine our position, because sometimes essential services so broad, like in Trinidad, it's like everybody could work on Sabbath, when it's immigration, when it's customs, when it's lifeguards. And I want to bring this here. And this is why we have to be very diligent in terms of not just saying it's essential services. For example, the Virgin Islands, almost everybody, Virgin police, prison, fire officers, and I think we kind of generally agree on that. But I had a very significant case recently, and nobody wanted to take it on, not even, I think, some attorneys. So I tell people when attorneys don't want to function, I am the bush lawyer for the union. I tell Pastor Hall that. And what happened was this. We were saying, okay, generally we're saying a lifeguard is about life saving and everything else. Well, some days you mightn't save one. But this guy said, listen, Pastor, the church has a right to have a perspective, but I'm an individual. And if it's one church that appreciate individual human rights, must be the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And if even you don't agree with me, but I have a right to have you fight for me. And I bought into what he was saying, So we have to, even among us, we have to give, access to our services to people who have a different viewpoint than us in terms of they should not. And I tell people too, I tell young people too, perhaps you should consider, because I notice one of your questions is about the issue, about, they're going to expect Sabbath, Sabbath work. They wanted to work on Sabbath. Why go forward? And then some of us are dishonest. We don't say we are Seventh-day Adventists. And when we get in the employment, we want to get Sabbath privilege. That should be a no-no. But I am saying right now that we have to really look at that essential services business compared with what the law says and how it measures up, to our philosophy of Sabbath keeping and what is in sync with Sabbath keeping and like saving lives.
Attorney Laughlin, I see you smiling there at something that Pastor Dottin shared. I don't know what the situation in St. Kitts is, but let's hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Pastor Greene. I smiled when Pastor Dottin indicated that sometimes we don't disclose these things because we feel that they may prevent us from being considered for a particular position that we would have applied for. But certainly I think that it is important when applying for jobs that we indicate or we signal to the prospective employer that you are a Seventh-day Adventist. It is important to disclose that fact. And the reason why I say that, because, and you would have alluded to it a little bit earlier in the discussion, Pastor Greene, but in relation to employment, we have the issue of the binding agreement that governs the employer-employee relationship. So then it's not only an issue of your right to exercise your religious belief, it is also an issue of contract. And when we look at some of the decisions being handed down by the courts generally look to the terms of and conditions of the contractual arrangement in addressing the issue. So that is the particular issue with employment and exercise of religious rights. So if you sign on to an agreement agreeing to work on days and hours, including Sabbath hours, then it is very difficult for you then to, after the fact, then signal that because of your religious persuasion, your religious beliefs, you are not able to honor your obligation to work on the Sabbath. You would have already signed the contractual agreement indicating that you agree to work on days including Sabbath. So employees need to be mindful of these issues. You need to disclose to the employer your religious persuasion, and you ought not to sign off, because it is important. we sometimes we say, well, I had a discussion with my supervisor, I had a discussion with my employer, and he indicated that certain rules of the workplace would not apply to me. You need to get those things in writing. So if it is that you're able to negotiate with the employer and you're able to get your time off on the Sabbath, you should have that in writing. That should be a part of your contractual arrangement with your employer. So it is very, very important.
You're raising some very important matters there. I wanted to go into a little more detail on this matter of disclosure. When do we disclose? Because there are those who are of the opinion likewise that if upfront I say I'm a Seventh Adventist, then I may be victimized. There are some individuals who may say, well, because you are a Seventh Adventist, they may not spell it out, but they may not give me the job because I'm a Seventh Adventist. So when do I disclose? I'm in full agreement that, you know, we should not wait until the challenge arises. But do I disclose at the beginning of the interview or after they say, okay, you have the job? When is the right time to disclose this? Because if I walk into the interview and I say, you know, well, I want to make clear from the beginning that I'm a Seventh Adventist, I'm not available to work on Saturdays. Even though at this moment, the business place may not open on Saturday, the owner may immediately say, well, in the event later down I need him to work on Saturdays, he will not be available, so I may not give him the job. So that can work against us, it can work for us. So when should we really disclose? I mean, I don't know what the rest of you think about this, but it's something that we probably need to explore. I've heard those who say, you know, wait until you're sure you have the job, and then before you start, you say, before you sign the document, say, by the way, I'm a Seventh Adventist, I'm not available on Saturdays. And then if they say, under those circumstances, you can get a job, then you can say, well, this is discrimination. So let me hear from the rest of you. What do you suggest at this point?
Dr. Greene, I think it's a matter of strategy. Because yes, you go for the interview, and if they decide that you're a suitable candidate and they offer you the job, I think that then would be the best time. Or it depends on the person, because I myself have been in a situation where I have gone for a specific job, and you know, we went through the interview process and you ask all the necessary questions and they like what they're hearing, because at the end of the day, you are there to provide a service. You're going to sell yourself. This is what I have to offer. In some situations, being a Seventh-day Adventist, they might not want to work with you, and in others, it might not be an issue. But if you think that it is going to be an issue, then I think that it should be declared, because if you go with a preconceived, and it depends on the job, and that is why, you know, one has to be careful as to the jobs which we apply for as Seventh-day Adventists, because in any event, you might be setting up the employer to say that they have discriminated against you in order to get that job. There are some persons who may do that. But in securing the job, then it becomes a live issue, and that would be before you have the contract. So then you have not done anything wrong. It is part of the negotiation process. So to my mind, I will say go through the process first and let them see what you have to offer. And then when they're thinking, what are the terms of the contract, it could be negotiated as part of the process, that I cannot work these hours, that instead of working on a Saturday, I may be able to work on Saturday evenings, I may be able to work on a Sunday. And there are ways around it. Negotiation is always an option.
Very, very interesting. LOS, you want to comment on this one? Or perhaps maybe we should go on to something else, because we have 15 more minutes.
Right.
And
Okay.
There are several questions that I'm going to ask you from the audience. But even before we go to the questions, let's just...
If I may add one point on that thing about a day work. And that is a call for all Seventh-day Adventists, those of us who are in the faith and established and have jobs where we don't have Sabbath issues. I think we owe it to God. I think a Seventh-day Adventist is a unique citizen in any country. He's a prized citizen. And we're supposed to have from the fourth commandment, the Sabbath commandment, the 6th day shall thou labor and do all your work. We're supposed to be such good workers, like Joseph in Potiphar's house, like Joseph in prison, that whenever another Seventh-day Adventist wants a job, as ambassadors for God, as good workers without a retirement age built into our concept of serving God and serving humanity, we must be the best workers. So when a Seventh-day Adventist, I mean, it will take time. We do have prejudices against us and our religion in some cultures, in some islands in the Caribbean. But from practical standpoint, once we get in, we're supposed to make ourselves such valuable employees that when another Seventh-day Adventist wants to come. I just thought I'd put that in. While we're talking about religious liberty and freedom, our work ethics must be second to none. And we mustn't be working just for a salary, but maybe working diligently unto the Lord.
It is an important observation. I'm glad you raised it. I'm trying to balance where we go here. I mean, it's so important that perhaps we can spend a little more time on it. But let me go ahead and ask. We do know that when you get the job, you sign a contract. Okay, fine. I'm not a Seventh-day Adventist. I sign a contract that I'm going to work for you. But then Pastor Dottin comes along and he has a crusade. And I feel convicted. And I decide I'm going to surrender my life to Jesus. And I get baptized, and I have a job that requires me to work on Saturdays. I go to my boss and I say to him or to her, listen, I am a Seventh-day Adventist. I have given my life to God. I cannot any longer work on Saturdays. That is going to interfere with my freedom of conscience based on the Constitution. The employer says, that might be so, but you have a contractual agreement with me, and this is binding. What happens in a case like that?
I want to jump in here now. I'll watch the time. I want to take more than a minute and a half. We have a case like that right now. It has taken 10 years in and out of court to the Labor Commission, the case of Vidal versus the state in St. Lucia. When she joined, all right, she had a work history of over 20 years. When she joined, she was not a Seventh-day Adventist. When she joined the commission, all right, she was not a Seventh-day Adventist. 2 years after she joined, she became a Seventh-day Adventist. And I'm telling you, it has been like hell for her. And she's gone to the court. The Labor Commission agreed with her. And significantly, the church had stood up with her big time. The media stood with her. The labor union stayed with her. We went in there, Carla. And I should tell you something, the Jehovah's Witness guy stood up for her strong. But up to now, the issue has not been resolved. And I know sometimes the wheels of justice turn very slowly, Brother Kelvin and the rest. But it is lasting over 10 years right now. So that, and she has remained firm. In fact, she has gone on to another job, but she has not given up the fight. So that relates to what's going on with the LGBT cases now. Because the famous case of Lillian Ladell, when she was employed in the marriage registry of the British government, marriage was between a male and a female, and then it changed, and she tried to fight. It went all of the European human courts, and she lost at that level. The next place is the appeal court in heaven, you know. So that those are heavy situations. It's either you walk or you fight it legally. I mean, apart from praying, all right. It's either you walk or you fight it legally, and we are prepared, you know, to fight it legally too.
I do follow that. My question though is, what takes precedence? I don't know what the attorneys will tell me, because the Constitution says that there is freedom of conscience, and the Constitution says I have the right to change my religion. Now I have a contractual agreement with you, and somewhere along the line I change my religion. That is now conflicting with the contract that I have with you. So what takes precedence at that time?
Well, the case law that we have from Canada and the United States, Canada, Britain, and some other territories, basically most of our territories have in employment law, okay, let me just make a distinction. There is the fundamental rights provisions that protect individuals from organs of the state under the Constitution, legislation, and government forcing and trying to interfere with that fundamental rights. The labor code most of our territories have a statutory labor code that governs the relationship between employee-employer in the private sector. Now, in the United States, the constitutional rights affect private sector employment, but in the Caribbean, we have discrimination at a statutory level from protection from discrimination for the employee-employer relationship and protection of religion discrimination and based on your sex and your creed. I think it was meant creed involves religious rights. Now, if you sign on and you were not a Seventh Adventist, you subsequently become a Seventh Adventist. The cases that we rely on when we go out to negotiate as an employee is based on the right. It is based on reasonable accommodation. The employer has to make every effort to accommodate you, and if it cannot be done, then you need to have a voluntary separation. And so that is a general principle. But if it can be proved that he can accommodate you and without affecting, there's a rotation system where you can work on Saturday nights or Sunday, and it doesn't affect the employer, then that is a test that the court applies. And it depends on the nature of the industry, the nature of the employer, his resources, and how many staff he have, all those variables.
We have a few questions that our viewers are asking. In fact, several questions. You're not going to get all of them through this afternoon. I'm going to suggest you good gentlemen and ladies, because you are Christians and kind and loving people, that sometime in the future we're going to have a part 2. It can be next week, it can be the following week, but sometime in February we need to have a part 2, because there are a few areas that I have not yet touched and which I want to go to. But let's take some questions. Let me direct this first question to Attorney John. This individual simply wants to know, is it discrimination to deny a person a job because they can't work on Saturdays?
I didn't get it.
Who did I say I was directing this to? I can't remember. I meant Lawyer Weste. The question is it discrimination not to employ a person because of his or her religion? That's really the question, because of his or her religion. So it's not about Seventh Adventists, but it's about religion. So if you know the person is Muslim or Rastafarian or something to that effect, is it discrimination to deny them the job because of their religion?
The short answer is yes, it is discrimination. In Antigua, our labor code specifically indicates that an employer is not entitled to discriminate against an individual with respect to hiring the person because of the individual's creed. And so if a decision is taken that one is not going to hire an individual because of their religion, whether it's Islam or Muslim or Seventh-day Adventist or Catholic, whatever the situation is, once the decision is taken that the hiring is because of their religious belief, then it is automatically discrimination. And that is from a statutory perspective in relation to our labor code, but it is also discrimination as against the state if one is seeking to be hired within the government and they are not hired because of their religious belief.
Does that also apply to placing students in school? So I come to you have a private institution and you're Muslim, you're Rastafarian, you're Baha'i, you're whatever, and I say, listen, I can't take you into this school because of your religion. Is that also discrimination?
Yes, it's also discrimination. Our Education Act also indicates that you cannot refuse to allow someone admission into the school as a consequence of their religious belief. And our Education Act does speak to public and private institutions. And as a consequence, if any educational institution, at least within Antigua, makes a determination that someone is not going to be admitted into the school, let's say because they're Rastafarian, that will amount to discrimination, and the individual can seek redress from the court to allow admission into the school.
Okay, here is another question from one of our viewers. Maybe I should ask Attorney Galloway this question. I recall when I was studying agricultural science in Trinidad and classes were being held on Sabbath, I asked to be excused, but others of the Adventist faith decided to attend. What advice can you give? This is interesting.
Yeah, that is problematic because you are standing up for your principles, and others who are supposed to be of the same faith, they do the opposite. My advice would be, yes, you are Seventh-day Adventist. Classes are on Saturdays. In the first instance, you approach the institution and you explain your position and you ask, are there alternatives available? Could the classes be held at another time, or could the credits be achieved in another subject, or is there something that can be done? If having spoken to them, there's no success, then you go to your religious liberty leader, because religious liberty leaders foster relationships with organizations within the community. So you do not know what relationships are there. So the religious liberty leader might be able to have some success in negotiating some alternative. Now, if that fails, you still do not attend the class, because it would be better to know that you held fast for your integrity and your moral principles. And there have been persons who have done that, and they have been given a failure mark, or they have to sit for another semester so that they could get the necessary credits to pass the course. But in doing that, you know that you stand firm, and also those others who might have sat the class, you might get them to rethink, because through your actions, you will show, well, look, this is what I believe, this is what I'm standing up for, this is the outcome, and so you could do the same. So it could be a positive impact as well.
Okay.
30 seconds. 30 seconds, I beg you.
Go right ahead.
I want to rush into this. I want to tell you straight, this is the biggest problem in UE, University of the West Indies. And S.L. Gatsby, before he died, told me, say, Pastor, that is not the biggest problem. When I went to UE St. Augustine defending this issue, they asked me straight, the Vice Chancellor, who is a real Adventist? Those who go into class on Friday night and Sabbath, or those who are not doing it? And I give him a straightforward answer there. I should tell you, I ain't let him off the hook. In Barbados, 4 students went to court, medical students, and they won. Okay, they preferred to forego their medical degree for a year, but they went and they eventually won. So that is a problem, and it partially reflects on our not being too consistent in transmission of our authentic values.
So this goes back to Attorney O'Loughlin, and I want to ask you this question too. This is a question from our viewers. The question is, given the constitutional provisions of freedom of religion, is it discriminatory? Is it right or wrong for an employer to ask the question in the interview, what is your religion? That's what the person is asking here. Attorney O'Loughlin.
The short answer to that, I would say no. I don't think that there is anything wrong in an employer asking what the person's religion is. However, I would hasten to add that one has to also consider motives. Is it that you're inquiring in order for you to ascertain the extent to which accommodations can then be made in the workplace to facilitate your ability to freely practice your religion or observe your religious day of worship? Or is it purely to be used to prohibit you from gaining employment? So what is the objective? What is the motive? Because if it is that you're soliciting that information to ascertain whether or not that person should be offered employment, then I would say that would be discriminatory, because you cannot discriminate on the basis of religion. So we have to be very clear, very, very mindful as to what the particular circumstances are in any given situation. So while it's not incorrect, or while it's not wrong to ask the question, you then have to further ask, what is the motive behind the question? If it is to ascertain arrangements to facilitate the person, or if it is to simply use it as a factor in determining your decision as to whether or not to engage the person, then that would be discriminatory. And we're speaking here within the context of public bodies or public institutions now, as it relates to discrimination under the Constitution. Because while I hear the others in relation to the private sector, the relevant employment acts governing those rights in relation to the private sector, here in St. Kitts and Nevis, the discriminatory provisions are very limited. So an employer cannot terminate an employee on the basis of religion. However, the Protection of Employment Act is silent in relation to recruitment, promotions, etc. So it's a little bit different here for us in St. Kitts and Nevis than it would be for persons, say, in Antigua and Barbuda.
Our time is up, but Lawyer John, I am kind of curious. I mean, why would if there is freedom of religion, why would you want to know what my religion is?
And that is a very difficult one. Yes, but the point about it is that for Seventh-day Adventists, we have to reinstill in our young people that it is not going to be an easy walk. It is not easy to be a Seventh-day Adventist. Sure. We have to get that fundamental. And in all my experience, and it's those challenges sometimes God puts us through to witness. Sometimes we go through it. We have a Vidal case in St. Lucia that's going on for the longest while, but it has attracted so many support groups that if it never happened, may not even have. And so PAL, the religious liberty group, CAL and PAL and all the different things, we have to continue as a Seventh-day Adventists in all spheres to continue to seek to bring awareness to public officials, to people in high places. When you look at the website, Sister White advocates that we have to reach out to other religious leaders in other churches and have that linkage with them. We don't compromise our faith, but influence them and educate them of what being a Seventh-day Adventist is all about. It is a unique lifestyle, some unique values, they are divine, and that is the point. So I don't know why an employer would ask. Sometimes our young people need to ask them, why are you asking? You need to put them. We need to educate our youth when at AY Society meetings, when you're going to an interview and they ask you, ask them why.
Well, this is a good place to stop. I want to thank all of you for your participation this afternoon. Very insightful responses, and you know, we do need to follow up. I do have several questions that are not answered yet. There are a couple other areas that we need to explore. So I am craving your indulgence in coming back, perhaps early.
2 hours next time. 2 hours next time.
We can agree for 2 hours, but that would be 2 weeks. All right.
All right.
So we will discuss that perhaps early February. Next week, by the way, to all of our viewers, next week we have, for the next 2 weeks, let me tell you, on the 30th of January, that's 2 weeks from now, we're going to be discussing the question of music. What's wrong with my music? That's our discussion. You know, there are lots of people who say Christians shouldn't listen to this, should listen to that. That's on the 30th. And next week, should I be concerned about the COVID vaccine? That's our topic for next week. So you want to be here you want to be on time. We have a very distinguished panel to talk with next week. Should I be concerned about the COVID vaccine? Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank all of you again. Thanks to our viewers. God bless you. Until next week, all the best.
Bye-bye, everyone.